2024 will be a historic year in modern political history. More people will vote in democratic elections this year than in any other time in human history, with elections in 76 countries representing approximately half the world's 8 billion people. However, a slightly more depressing figure is that only just over half of those 76 elections, 43 of them to be precise, will probably be free and fair. In the case of the other 33, the results will be open to question, or in some instances, such as the Russian Federation, the elections involved will just be a bit of pageantry to pretend that the leaders of these countries are supported by a majority of the citizens in them. One of these 33 countries, and one that will probably fly somewhat under the radar in an otherwise busy calendar of bigger elections, is the Solomon Islands. Yet, the elections here are important. On them may hinge the issue of whether or not the Solomon Islands are still a democracy of any kind, or whether the incumbent, Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare, should now be considered a dictator. When are the elections? So, before discussing Sogavare and the upcoming elections, let's just look at some of the basic details of these elections. These elections are being held in the Solomon Islands, a country lying in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, east of Papua New Guinea and northeast of Australia. 750,000 people live here on 6 main islands, with a smattering of people across hundreds of smaller islands. Almost exactly half of the overwhelmingly Melanesian population will be eligible to vote in elections on the 17th of April 2024. These will decide the composition of the 12th Parliament of the Solomon Islands and will fill 50 seats therein. The Prime Minister of the country will also be elected. The main players. As we have seen, the most important figure in all of this will be Manasseh Sogavare. Sogavare has served several terms as Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands over the past quarter of a century. In 2000, he was first elected as the head of the People's Progressive Party. This was a short interim period in office, as Sogavare was elected following a political scandal, and he left office after just a year and a half. He was subsequently elected as Prime Minister again in 2006 as head of the Solomon Islands Social Credit Party, and served for a year and a half again. However, it is really since 2014 that Sogavare has dominated the country, serving as Prime Minister for the majority of those 10 years, barring a period in the middle when Rick Huenipuela served a 1.5-year term. In both of these latter occasions, Sogavare had been elected as Prime Minister as an independent candidate. The Solomon Islands has an unusual political system insofar as there is no dominant political party. Instead, there are over half a dozen small parties, such as the Democratic Party, the United Party, the Kadir Party, and the Democratic Alliance Party. Moreover, these do not win the majority of the seats in Parliament. For instance, in the last elections in 2019, the Democratic Party and the Kadir Party won 8 seats each in Parliament, while the United Party won just 2 seats. A half a dozen other parties picked up a few seats each, but independent candidates won 21 seats, over 40% of the total. Consequently, electoral politics in the Solomon Islands is very much about individuals rather than parties, and this is what has allowed Sogavare to gain appointment as Prime Minister twice as an independent. 13 parties in all, plus numerous independent candidates, will contest the elections in mid-April. While Sogavare is the favourite to be elected as Prime Minister, he has challengers. The two biggest are Rick Huenipuela, the head of the Democratic Alliance Party and the former Prime Minister between 2017 and 2019, and Matthew Kuperweil, a member of the Democratic Party and the leader of the opposition in Parliament since 2019. These have formed a loose alliance to try to oust Sogavare out of fear of his dictatorial tendencies, something which was evidenced in a decision in 2023 to delay elections for several months, a quasi-unconstitutional move. New parties and groupings have also emerged in the Solomon Islands in the run-up to the election, so the potential result, if there are free and fair elections, is very debatable. The issues. There are many core issues in play during the Solomon Islands election. A prominent concern is the prevalence of corruption in the Solomon Islands, an issue which has plagued the politics of the island archipelago for decades, since it acquired independence from Britain back in 1978. Public order issues are also paramount following a period in 2021 in which riots broke out in the capital Honiara and martial law was briefly imposed. Climate change is clearly a concern as well in a country which will be substantially impacted on by rising water levels over the next half a century. But undoubtedly, the biggest issue of all is the Solomon Islands' relationship with the People's Republic of China. Historically, the Solomon Islands had been wary of the government in Beijing and had recognised the Republic of China government in Taiwan instead. However, amongst the most controversial elements of Sogavare's tenure as Prime Minister over the last 10 years has been his volte-face in diplomatic relations with the rival Chinese powers, deciding to recognise the People's Republic in 2019 and sever official ties with Taiwan. Additionally, new economic agreements have been reached between China and the Solomon Islands, and a highly controversial security agreement was concluded in 2022. This allows China to deploy military forces in Solomon Islands naval bases and on some of the islands, and has not just alarmed public opinion domestically about the islands becoming a quasi-vassal of China, but also internationally, as the US, Australia and others have expressed concern about China acquiring a satellite state in the South Pacific. The big question is, will the elections on the 17th of April be free and fair? This is highly debatable. There have been major issues surrounding vote manipulation in elections in the Solomon Islands for years, notably during the 2014 election which brought Sogavare to power. Most commentators believe there will be no issues in April, though there will be outside observers from Australia and other countries monitoring the elections. We may well only know when these observers provide a post-mortem on the election in late April and May whether Sogavare, if he wins a new term, is a democratically elected Prime Minister or can be essentially viewed as a dictator.